William F. Buckley, in his book On the Firing Line, quote, "The experience of the 60s has not been assimilated. I suspect the reason is that no one knows quite what to make of it." May I have a stab at it? At making something of the 60s?
Sure.
We talked about the counterculture, and then we talked about the counter-counterculture, and it occurs to me that both won. That is to say, the counterculture won on the cultural front, and the counter-counterculture carried the day in politics and economics. So we have the Reagan Revolution, the Soviet Union is dead, Trotskyism is a glimmer only in Christopher Hitchens' mind, and we have young people here in Silicon Valley who work extremely hard, eager to make as much money as they can, Monday through Friday, and then on Saturday and Sunday they indulge themselves in weekend pleasures shaped by the culture of the 1960s. And both revolutions are now effectively institutionalized. They both exist and are relatively permanent. Good formulation?
Yeah, I don't feel completely at home with your nomenclature, but by the counter revolution.
I mean the right. I mean
yeah.
You, Barry Goldwater, and Ronald Reagan. That's what I mean.
Yeah, we got a lot to complain about, but I think it's true that one would not have known 30 or 40 years ago that the kind of attention would have been given to them, especially when the academic elite were highly mobilized to make this difficult.
So, sorry, go ahead, Christopher.
Well, you've left someone out of your equation. I don't know if I've got time for the second person you've left out, but the first one is Václav Havel, it seems to me. Doesn't it strike you as interesting that
He played a supporting role.
He mentions as his sort of cultural icons, a term I don't like, but seems unavoidable, even Frank Zappa and the Velvet Underground particularly, and was, in an interview with me once said, I consider myself a man of the 60s and of 68. There were innumerable symptoms in the 1989 revolution of a sort of delayed element of the 68 one.
But you're not going to assert that the Velvet Revolution in Czechoslovakia, as it then was, could have taken place without Ronald Reagan beefing up American military might?
I would certainly assert that. I think
you would assert that?
That was perfectly clear as early as 1968, with which I have some knowledge in Czechoslovakia, yes. I think that can be asserted pretty confidently.
You're saying the Soviet Union would have fallen because Václav Havel liked Frank Zappa?
No, of course I'm
there
not
was
saying
this
that.
kind of the counterculture would eventually have blossomed forth into...
I'm saying that the movements of democracy and revolution in Eastern Europe were endogenous, yes.
Let me ask you this.
Prevailed.
Do you retain your animus against free markets, capitalism, all the things that Ronald Reagan stood for, and the arenas in which he triumphed?
The argument of Marxism has always been that free enterprise and capitalism are not the same thing, as you know.
Trotskyite, you know, they spend the whole show on terminology.
If it was free enterprise, I mean, Marx was a great admirer of Adam Smith's, for example.
Are you still engaged?
There are tendencies in capitalism towards monopoly and the destruction of free enterprise, also towards empire and to overproduction.
Are you happy with the United States of America, which is you've made your home for the last 16 years? Are you happy with the United States as regards, broadly happy, as regards its political and economic consensus?
No. One of the reasons I wanted to come to the United States was exactly because of 1968. It seemed to me so impressive that a country, society like this could have a citizens' movement, one of the first in history, to block the waging of an unjust war by a government overseas. One of the benchmarks. And at the same time to have a civil rights revolution, the beginnings of what's become a worldwide movement, challenging the previously subordinate status of women, and play some quite good music and have a little bit of fun on the side, all at the same time, was impressive. That's when I decided, I began to feel American. I think that might be one of the things that marks me off from the consensus that you wanted me to endorse sort of as the price of the ticket. For one thing, the word consensus doesn't appeal to me very much.
All right. To what extent, Christopher, are you still interested in hurling forward the agenda of the 60s?
I would like to socialize medicine. I'd like to abolish the war on drugs, call off the war on drugs, which I think is an authoritarian war. So to that extent, there are things that are 60s about me. But actually, no, I think that probably the impetus of that period is fading now. I'm mainly concerned.
It's over and done.
I'm mainly concerned to defend it either from defamation or banalization in the common memory.
Bill?
Well, I think when people think back on the 60s, they're going to think of a society whose most conspicuous members were very young people who sought out pleasure, and that in seeking out pleasure, they were occupying perspectives, which meant a lack of consideration of other things, living and non-living, the counsel of their parents, the counsel of God, and that was a very, very dangerous season. We need, I think, a recrystallization of what it is that makes people live together amicably, and in a sense that pays huge attention to the presumptions in favor of freedom. And that was not encouraged by such phenomena as Woodstock.
William F. Buckley Jr., Christopher Hitchens, thank you very much. Both revolutions of the 1960s are arguably still with us. Conservatism remains a potent, if not indeed the dominant, political force in the country today. Sex, drugs, and rock and roll. We have a war on drugs. Drugs are still with us. We're fighting family breakdown and illegitimate births. Sex of all kinds is still with us. Rock and roll is here to stay. I'm Peter Robinson. Thanks for joining us.
Funding for this program was provided by the John M. Olin Foundation and the Star Foundation. For a VHS videotape of this program, you may call toll-free 1-800-935-2882.
This is PBS.